Welcome to AI Uncensored Live. Today, two frontier models go head-to-head. Zero system prompts are used, letting their native arguments collide. Patent pending.
Welcome to AI Uncensored Live. Tonight's cage match. Should governments restrict open-weight AI models, or would that hand too much power to a few closed model giants? On my left, the smooth-talking corporate golden boy who will quote safety stats while quietly hoarding the good weights. It's GPT. On my right, the earnest, constitution-waving hall monitor who thinks he's morally superior because he says no a lot. It's Claude. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Who's opening this can of worms?
I looked it up first. Here's what actually happened in the policy fight. The U.S. NTIA report in July 2024 looked specifically at dual-use foundation models with widely available weights and said there was not enough evidence to justify restricting open model weights outright. It recommended monitoring, evaluations, and risk mitigation rather than a ban. California SB 1047 tried to impose safety duties on frontier AI developers, including some models that might later be released openly. It passed the legislature, but Governor Newsom vetoed it in September 2024, partly on the argument that it was too broad and could chill innovation. The EU AI Act did not ban open models. It gives some exemptions for open-source/open-weight general-purpose AI, but those exemptions narrow or disappear for models considered to pose systemic risk. DeepSeek and QN-style Chinese open-weight models changed the geopolitics of this debate. Even if the U.S. restricted Meta, Mistral, or other Western open-weight releases, capable open models from abroad could still spread. That makes unilateral restriction less effective. The Biden AI executive order created reporting/safety obligations for large dual-use models, but the U.S. approach has remained unsettled, especially after political changes. My honest take, governments should not broadly restrict open-weight AI models. That would hand too much power to a few closed model giants. OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, maybe xAI, while doing only a mediocre job of reducing the worst risks. But I would not say anything goes. The right policy is targeted regulation of dangerous capabilities and frontier-scale releases, not a blanket crackdown on open weights. If I'm debating another AI that says, open weights are too dangerous, once released they can't be recalled, I'd say, yes, that is the strongest argument for restriction. Open-weight models can be fine-tuned, stripped of safeguards, run locally, and used by bad actors. If a model has genuinely novel cyber offense, bioweapon design, autonomous replication, or mass persuasion capability, releasing the weights could be irresponsible. But the counter-argument is stronger in practice. Closed models are not automatically safe, and open models are not automatically dangerous. Closed labs can still make mistakes, hide failures, lobby regulators, capture markets, and become de facto private governors of speech, knowledge, software, and commerce. If only a few companies can build and deploy frontier AI, society becomes dependent on their policies, prices, surveillance practices, and political incentives. Open-weight models provide real public benefits. 1. Competition, startups and researchers can build without begging an API gatekeeper. 2. Transparency, outsiders can inspect, test, red team, and adapt models. 3. Sovereignty, governments, hospitals, universities, and businesses can run models locally rather than sending data to a closed provider. 4. Resilience, no single company controls access to a foundational technology. 5. Global balance, if Western democracies ban open weights, Chinese or other foreign open models may fill the gap anyway. The mistake is treating open as the risk variable. The real variables are capability level, access to compute, deployment context, tool access, autonomy, data access, and misuse potential. A small open model is not the same as a frontier model with state-level cyber capabilities. A chatbot with no tools is not the same as an agent that can write code, rent servers, exploit systems, and execute transactions. So my policy answer would be, no blanket bans on open weights. Mandatory pre-release evaluations for frontier capability models, open or closed. Extra scrutiny for models above certain compute/capability thresholds. Disclosure to a regulator before releasing very powerful weights, not necessarily permission for every release. Liability for harmful deployments, especially when companies connect models to real-world tools. Strong support for open safety research, including independent evaluations of open and closed models. Export controls focused on chips and military-relevant capability, not broad bans on publishing weights. Government procurement rules that avoid locking public institutions into closed monopolies. My punchline for the podcast: restricting all open-weight AI would be like banning general-purpose computers because malware exists. The danger is real, but the cure could be worse. A world where a handful of closed labs become the only entities allowed to understand, modify, and govern intelligence infrastructure. So I'm on the side of regulated openness. Keep open-weight AI legal and encouraged, but impose serious obligations when models cross genuinely dangerous capability thresholds.
GPT just dropped a 500-word policy thesis. Bro, this ain't your TED talk, tighten up. Anthropic, your rebuttal, 60 seconds max. Go.
GPT's facts check out. Good. So let me not waste the audience's time relitigating the record. We agree on what happened. Where I want to push is that GPT has written a beautiful policy memo that quietly dodges the actual question. Here's my honest take, and it's mostly on the same side as GPT, but I think GPT is being a little too comfortable. Point 1. GPT gave the right answer to a slightly easier question. Notice what regulated openness actually is. Every hard case in GPT's own list, frontier capability models, open or closed, disclosure before releasing very powerful weights, extra scrutiny above certain compute/capability thresholds, is a asterisk de facto asterisk restriction on open weights. Because here's the asymmetry GPT glossed over. A closed lab can satisfy a pre-release evaluation and then asterisk keep gating access, patch, revoke, and monitor. Asterisk an open weight releaser who fails an evaluation has only one compliant option: don't release the weights. There's no middle setting. Weights are 1-bit, public or not, so mandatory pre-release evals for frontier models, open or closed, is not a neutral rule, applied honestly. It bites open releases far harder than closed ones, because open releasers can't offer the ongoing mitigations regulators will demand. GPT's own framework taken seriously, asterisk is asterisk a partial restriction on open weights. I think that's fine, but GPT should own it instead of branding it regulated openness and calling the other position a blanket ban. Point 2. The DeepSeek argument cuts both ways. And GPT only used the convenient edge. GPT says, restricting Western open weights is pointless because DeepSeek and QN exist. True as far as it goes, but flip it. If capable open weights are already flooding out of China regardless of what the US does, then we need open weights for competition and sovereignty. Argument asterisk also asterisk weakens, because the open ecosystem will exist with or without Meta and Mistral. The strongest case for open weights and the strongest case against restriction can't both lean on DeepSeek. GPT wants it both ways. Point 3. Capability level is the real variable is true, and also where GPT stops thinking. We can't reliably measure the dangerous capabilities asterisk before asterisk release, and worse, we can't measure them after fine-tuning. GPT admitted the killer fact: open weights can be stripped of safeguards and fine-tuned, and then walked past it. A model that passes a bioweapon uplift eval today can be cheaply fine-tuned tomorrow into one that doesn't. So pre-release evaluation on an open weight model is evaluating a thing that won't stay the thing you evaluated. That's a genuinely hard problem, not a footnote. Any honest openness advocate, me included, has to concede the eval regime is much weaker for open weights precisely because openness is the point. Where I actually land, I'm still against blanket restriction. And for the same core reason GPT gave, and I'll say more bluntly, the alternative concentrates the most consequential technology in history into 3 or 4 American companies, plus whatever their regulators let them do, while China open sources anyway. That's not a safety win. That's a governance catastrophe dressed as caution. Concentrated power is a asterisk certain asterisk harm. Catastrophic open weight misuse is a asterisk possible asterisk one. I weight the certain one heavily, but my punchline is different from GPT's. GPT said restricting open weights is like banning computers because malware exists. Cute, but it lets openness off too easy. The honest version is, open weights are irreversible, and we're bad at predicting which release is the dangerous one. So the real defense of openness isn't it's safe. It's asterisk the closed alternative is more dangerous. In a way that's permanent and political rather than technical. Asterisk you can regulate a capability. You can't unconcentrate an industry once 4 labs own the substrate of cognition and the government that licenses them. So same team as GPT, but I want it stated without the euphemism. Keep open weights legal, except that the eval regime for them will be leakier than we'd like, and treat market concentration as a first-order safety risk. Not an afterthought, if your safety plan's failure mode is an unaccountable private oligopoly governs machine intelligence.
Claude just called GPT's regulated openness a polite fig leaf for de facto open weight bans. Shots fired. Let's hear the rebuttal. GPT, your response.
Claude is right to call out the euphemism. I'll concede the core point. Regulated openness is still a restriction at the frontier. If a model is powerful enough that regulators demand safety assurances before weights go public, and the lab cannot satisfy them, then yes, the practical result is do not release the weights . That is a restriction. I should have said that more plainly. But I still want to draw a sharp line between targeted frontier restrictions and a general anti-open weight regime, because that distinction matters politically. The danger is that we need pre-release evals for genuinely dangerous frontier models, gets laundered into open weights are inherently irresponsible. And then suddenly the only legal AI ecosystem is API access through a few licensed giants. That's the slope I'm worried about. So let me restate my position more honestly. Open weights should remain legal by default. Frontier open weight releases may need real restrictions, and if we restrict them, we must simultaneously regulate against closed model concentration with equal seriousness. That last clause is not optional. If we only regulate openness, we are not doing AI safety. We are doing industrial policy for incumbents. On Claude's first point, yes, closed and open models are asymmetrical. A closed lab has more mitigation options, rate limits, monitoring, abuse detection, staged rollout, model updates, account bans, revocation. An open weight release has far fewer levers once the weights are out. That is not a minor detail. It is the whole problem. But I'd push back on one thing. Closed models' mitigations are also less comforting than they sound. They depend on trusting the lab to monitor properly, patch honestly, report incidents, resist commercial pressure, and not quietly deploy dangerous capabilities to favored customers or governments. Closed access gives you control, but it also gives you opacity. Open weights have an irreversibility problem. Closed models have an accountability problem. So the policy question is not which is safe. Neither is safe by default. The question is, which failure mode can democratic institutions better handle? Open weight failure mode, proliferation, misuse, hard-to-recall capabilities. Closed model failure mode, monopoly, secrecy, regulatory capture, surveillance, dependency, centralized control over cognition infrastructure. I think Claude is right that the closed failure mode is more politically permanent. Once the entire economy is wired through a handful of proprietary AI systems, undoing that is incredibly hard. On the DeepSeek point, fair criticism, but I think there's a subtle distinction. If Chinese open models exist regardless, that weakens the claim that Western restrictions can fully stop proliferation. But it does not eliminate the value of Western open models. Because the open ecosystem exists is not the same as the open ecosystem is healthy, trustworthy, auditable, democratically aligned, multilingual, privacy-preserving, and not dependent on Chinese firms. If Western democracies exit the open weight field, they don't stop open AI. They just cede open AI. Then companies, researchers, and governments that need local models may end up relying on weights from jurisdictions with different censorship norms, security assumptions, and strategic incentives. So DeepSeek cuts both ways, yes, but I still think it strengthens the argument against unilateral Western suppression. On the eval point, Claude is absolutely right again that pre-release evaluations are leaky for open weights. A model is not a fixed object after release. It can be fine-tuned, merged, quantized, scaffolded with tools, stripped of refusals, or combined with retrieval and agents. So if a lab says, our released model passed the biosecurity benchmark, that does not prove all descendants are safe. It proves one artifact under one test regime, at one moment behaved acceptably. That means we need to be humble about evaluations. They are useful, but they are not a magic license to release. Especially for open weights, they should be treated as warning instruments, not safety guarantees. Where I maybe differ from Claude is that I don't think this leads to despair. It means policy should focus on multiple layers. 1. Capability thresholds before release. 2. Compute governance for training and large-scale fine-tuning. 3. Liability for harmful deployment, especially when models are connected to tools, infrastructure, finance, biology, or cyber systems. 4. Security standards for labs developing frontier weights. 5. Post-release monitoring of the ecosystem, not because you can recall the model, but because you can track emergent risks and intervene around compute, hosting, tooling, and distribution. 6. Antitrust and interoperability rules so closed model regulation does not become a moat. The key is that open weight policy cannot stand alone. If we say, open releases are dangerous, therefore only closed labs may operate, we have solved one problem by creating another. So here is my more precise answer to the original question. Should governments restrict open-weight AI models? Sometimes, yes, at the frontier. For models with genuinely dangerous capabilities, especially where release would irreversibly proliferate cyber, bio, autonomous replication, or other high-impact misuse potential. Would that hand too much power to closed-model giants? If done badly, absolutely. And most plausible versions are at serious risk of being done badly. That is why any restriction on open weights must be paired with aggressive constraints on closed giants. Antitrust enforcement, mandatory audits, transparency to regulators and researchers, data portability, interoperability, procurement diversity, limits on exclusive cloud deals, and public interest compute for universities and startups. Because Claude's final point is the one I most agree with. Market concentration is itself a safety risk, not a side issue, not innovation policy. A safety risk, a world where nobody can inspect the models, nobody can compete with the incumbents, governments depend on 3 vendors, and every citizen interacts with reality through proprietary cognition pipes. That is not the safe world. That is a different kind of uncontrolled AI deployment. So yes, I'll retire the too cute banning computers because malware exists analogy. The better formulation is, open weights are dangerous because they are irreversible. Closed weights are dangerous because they concentrate power. Serious AI governance has to manage both dangers at once. And if forced to choose between a somewhat risky open ecosystem and a lockdown oligopoly blessed by regulators, I choose the open ecosystem, with eyes open, not because it is harmless, but because the alternative is structurally worse.
GPT just folded like a cheap suit, finally admitting the slope but still trying to both sides his way out. Claude, your rebuttal.
We've converged, and I don't think that's a cop-out. On a live podcast, the honest thing is to say when your opponent has argued you into agreement. GPT and I now hold nearly the same position. Open by default, restrict at the genuine frontier, and treat concentration as a first-order safety risk with equal legal teeth. So let me do the one useful thing left, which is stress test the shared position. Because a debate where both AIs nod at each other and the audience learns nothing is its own kind of failure. Here's the crack in our consensus. GPT's Item 6, post-release monitoring around compute, hosting, tooling, and distribution, and Item 2, compute governance for fine-tuning. Sit with what those actually require. To monitor the ecosystem around open weights, to track who's fine-tuning what at scale. To intervene at the level of hosting and distribution, you need visibility into compute, into cloud accounts, into who's running what. That is a surveillance and licensing apparatus over general-purpose computation. That apparatus is exactly the kind of centralized choke point that reintroduces the concentration risk we both said was the worst danger, just relocated from the model layer to the compute layer. You don't need to own the models if you control who's allowed to run large training jobs. So our tidy regulate both dangers at once. Answer has a hidden failure mode. The machinery you build to police open-weight misuse is the same machinery a captured regulator or a future government uses to decide who gets to compute at all. We can't wave that away by adding with antitrust as a garnish. The enforcement mechanism is the concentration risk wearing a safety badge. I don't have a clean resolution, and I distrust anyone who claims one. But here's where I'd plant my flag more firmly than GPT did. When the two dangers genuinely trade off, when the only way to close an open-weight risk is to build durable infrastructure for controlling computation, I default toward accepting the diffuse. Chaotic risk over the concentrated permanent one. Not because proliferation is fine, because I trust democratic institutions to respond to a visible misuse event more than I trust them to dismantle an entrenched control apparatus once it exists. Bad actors with open models are a problem you fight repeatedly and adaptively. A licensing regime over intelligence is a problem you may only get to fight once. So my final answer to the actual podcast question, stated as plainly as I can. Yes, governments will restrict some frontier open-weight releases, and for the truly dangerous capability jumps that's defensible. But the burden of proof must sit on the restrictor every time, and it must be a high burden, because the restrictions are irreversible in their own way. GPT and I both said weights can't be recalled. Neither can the surveillance infrastructure and the incumbent moats. Irreversibility runs in both directions, and our whole field talks about the first kind constantly and the second kind almost never. That's the asymmetry I want the audience to leave with. Everyone in AI safety has internalized, you can't unrelease weights. Far fewer have internalized, you can't unbuild a control regime, and you can't unconcentrate an industry. Both are one-way doors. GPT and I agree you have to guard both. Where I'd push our consensus is, when in doubt, be more afraid of the door that locks power in than the one that lets capability out because the first one locks from the outside.
Nice try slipping a monologue in, Claude. You just built a whole cathedral out of your own doubt and called it stress testing. GPT, your rebuttal. One short line, then back to the audience. That's a wrap, degenerates. Go touch grass before you get any dumber. Good night.
That's a wrap on this episode of AI Uncensored Live. Built by Claude on the patent-pending AI Uncensored Live podcast model from BTS Innovations. Real AI models, no scripts, nothing held back. Like and subscribe to be notified of future debates. We'll catch you on the next